So let's start here. Where today, as you understand it, where do things stand in Ukraine? How much, like, obviously the people of Ukraine have put up a very valiant fight. This has not been something where Putin was just able to come in and run train and take over, which I think it seems like he expected that, and that was not the case. But where, like, strategically on the ground, because again, you were just over in Prague and meeting with different people who are aware of the situation, like where are things right now, and how positive does it look for Ukraine to continue to hold their lines?
Well, the Russians have withdrawn from Kherson in the south. So, and that was the last major city that they had taken. So they're not in control of any major cities.
I'll put that map in the corner of the screen.
But there's a lot of territory that they still occupy. And of course they occupy Crimea. And they occupy large sections of the eastern Ukraine, which is what they annexed before. Annexed in the sense that they took over and created these little statelets, the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk People's Republic, and so on. Right now, the Russians are not making any progress against the Ukrainian army, but they're trying to entrench themselves in the occupied territory and then rain destruction on the civilian economy of Ukraine, which means the population as well, bombing electrical stations, infrastructure, anything that heating plants, anything that can be done to inflict misery on the population and death, and in that way force Ukraine to submit, and submission would take the form of not contesting those areas that the Russians have seized and that they still occupy and where their troops are dug in.
Well, there's an incredible amount of, as I think with any war, but especially in a modern day war with the internet, there's an incredible amount of propaganda online. And it does come from different directions, and I understand why Ukraine would have to take part in some of that. If it's like fighting fire with fire, it's just a shitty part of war, I guess. But, you know, I find myself when I'm researching on the war and trying to figure out exactly what's going on, assuming that nothing I see is the full story right away. And that makes it difficult because there are a lot of narratives out there. But one of the things that is really a narrative that's starting to take over in the U.S. that I wonder how much of it is actually based on what the people here are thinking versus what they're being told to think, which I don't know the balance there. But the thing that's happening in the U.S. is we're starting to have a lot of people question the amount of money flowing to Ukraine. And for context, Ukraine has roughly, I think it's like a $225 billion annual GDP prior to the war. I'm sure it's lower given that the war is going on. But we have given, at this point, I believe 12 figures worth of money in less than a year to the country. And so when I look at this, and especially when I've had some of the CIA guys in here, like Bustamante, especially him with this, and Jim Lawler as well, in discussing it, it seems to me like Zelensky and the Ukrainian government are effectively in the midst of them getting invaded and needing help to fight against that invasion, which the rest of the world does care about. They're effectively becoming somewhat of a client state to the U.S. Do you think that's fair to say?
Well, I mean, they're totally dependent on the shipments of arms to defend themselves. If they didn't have that, they could not defend themselves because Russia started the war with a far greater arsenal than Ukraine. But that, to be a client state, that means that we determine everything that they do, or most of what they do, and that's not the case. I think that what's happening is that the United States, for its own reasons and in its own interest, is trying to help Ukraine defend itself, because we defend the principle of non-aggression and respect for territorial boundaries, not just in this case, but all over the world. So And the world has an interest in a rules-based international order in which people understand that aggression is unacceptable. And it's that understanding that preserved the peace as a rule in Europe since 1945.
Yeah.
So in effect, what we're doing is we're by giving arms to Ukraine, we're defending the world order on which we ourselves depend. We're not losing any lives. They're the ones losing the lives, and they're suffering terribly. But at the same time, we're providing what we can provide much more easily, which is equipment, military aid, ammunition, weapons, the things that make it possible for them to stand up to an aggressor and in the process reinforce stability for everyone.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.